Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Connor Carrick Podcast. I'm your host, current New Jersey Devils defenseman, Connor Carrick. We are at the end of season 1. Thank you for joining me alongside this process. And I thought today we'd have a special sort of episode where I reflect on the conversations I've been able to have here in season 1, some of the highlights with the different guests. I'm very proud of, the start. I'm very proud of the support we've been able to gather already. It's been a lot of fun, and I know I've learned a lot. And that's kind of what this podcast is about today, to try and look back on some of the highlights and try and consider what lessons I've learned, how I'm implementing them into my life. So let's go ahead and start with, our first guest, who is Elliotte Friedman.
Well, first of all, Connor, thanks for having me on. And secondly, I'm glad you're doing this. As you mentioned, there is some of the fear of being first, especially in hockey. Hockey's got a different, especially hockey's got a much different culture. In the NBA, there are players who do this right now, and they wouldn't think second about doing it right now. And to me, that's one of the strengths about the NBA, is that players feel very empowered there, and the whole personality of the sport is different. And I think eventually we will get into a way or a time where the NHL moves towards the NBA, just in terms of the personalities of the players have to do a better job of selling the sport. We're getting there, and we will get there. So I'm glad you're doing this. And the reason I mentioned that I thought Connor would be the right person to do this is there are certain players in the league who, as I like to explain, they make it easy for the dumb reporters like myself to understand what's going on out there. And Connor was a guy, when he played in Toronto, and I know I wasn't the only one, there were other reporters who would go up to him and say, "Hey, I saw this in your game the other night. Explain it to me." And you could explain it. And it's sort of like why Magic Johnson failed as a basketball coach, because everything that Magic Johnson did on the court was instinctive. And he was, elite almost doesn't serve him directly or fairly. But sometimes when you're a player at your level, it comes so instinctively to you that you can't explain it to other people. So I think that your gift for explanation, it has to be shared. And that's why I think you should eventually, when your time comes 50 years from now and your career is over, you go into media. So I'm glad you're doing this, because you have a gift to be able to explain.
So Elliotte was important to this podcast because he was a nudge. He was a person that helped me go from 0 to 1 and finally making the decision to start this podcast. He was and is an important person in Toronto hockey media, and he just helped me feel more comfortable in my ability to own my ability to talk. It's something that, if you know me, if we're ever at a barbecue together, hanging out, or after a round of golf, I like to tell stories. You know that I like to talk, usually uninterrupted. So that's why I'm looking forward to this podcast with just me as well again today. But Elliotte and I, we touched on the responsibility that hockey has to sell our sport and to give a window into the brilliant people and the brilliant stories that our sport has to feature. And I think that, we're quarantine is finally, sort of closing up the NHL. It's Saturday, July 11th in the morning here. I'm having a great morning. Had coffee this morning, walked and grabbed cold brew. I got my hydrogen water going. So it's been an awesome morning, but it's right off the back of the NHL has extended the CBA and agreed upon return to play principles and memorandums in that. We saw this during the quarantine time. We've seen guys emerge on TikTok. We've seen, I've tried to do it myself. I've gone a little cold of late, and, Lexi and I have to get back to our choreography. Whether it's, Lexi was sending me, Andrew Ladd had, some training videos he was doing on TikTok, whether it's Brendan Gallagher, who's been outrageous on there with him in the Chara clip. I think our sport has a lot of great people and obviously stellar players. And there is this improved effort now, I think, to sell our game. And I think the chaos and the stillness of COVID-19, it's hard to look for positives. It's been a good-sized catastrophe worldwide, but if there are some positive come out of it for the sport of hockey, certainly the stability of the business moving forward, I think will be a positive. And then, of course, the personality that came out. I think guys were at home hanging out, bored, and didn't have teammates to give them shit when they walked in the next day. If they had a funny TikTok or an Instagram that was funny, or a little bit off the map for their own personality, I think it's going to be good for our game. And so, with Elliot, I am grateful for the nudge that he gave me initially to start this podcast. He was a guest I was comfortable with having first because he lives on the air. It's how he makes his money. It's how he feeds his family. So I figured, worst case scenario, if I dropped the ball, he'd be able to cover for me. And it was a great time. He really propped up my eloquence, I guess, and ability to explain. It's been something I've been working on here day in, day out, as I, week in, week out, try to record different podcasts with different guests and, try to make sure that I'm highlighting the special uniqueness of each individual story. So Elliot, thank you for our time together. I think certainly some of our behind the scenes conversations in Toronto there were pivotal towards getting the wheels in motion for this podcast. And it's been a lot of fun, something I've gained so much from and have deepened a lot of relationships, either with the podcast guests or definitely with friends and family who've given me feedback. So Elliot, I wanted to say thanks, and you never forget your first.
I think when you're an athlete at the highest level, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. And it's something that you are 24/7, and it can become very much about yourself all the time. It's like, did I sleep enough? I need a nap. Did I eat well enough? What am I going to do now? Did I work hard enough? I'm sore. How do I feel better? It's just all about you all the time. And it has to be in many cases. So I think, having someone that understands that and sees that as your ability to excel and be the best version of yourself, versus being like, well, geez, I wish we could just go out tonight, but you need to go to bed early. That's no fun, right? Like everything else, I think having someone that really understands what you love and understands your need to be the best version of yourself and what that takes. It's not an easy thing, but I think when somebody sees that in you and they see that makes you the best version of you, they work with it and they help you be that. So that I think that's how I see it. And I realized once I got out of sport how self-indulged you are in sport. And, it's especially, again, it keeps coming back to kids, but it's no longer, it's not about me anymore. And it's, for a long time, I was able to do those things I needed to do. And you just have to compete at the highest level. There's no way around that.
And then we move on to our second guest, Jayna Hefford, Hockey Hall of Famer, super special competitor for Team Canada for, 2 decades really. And I really took to heart, I was having a hard time, in the beginning of quarantine there, just because I was still embodying a lot of my habits from the season, and there was still some uncertainty that we might come back and play. So that fear of, am I doing everything I need to be and should be doing to be my best was, very present in my mind at that time. And I think with Jayna just became clear that fear as an athlete is your friend. It's not something to wish away or meditate away. It's the fear of, am I training? Am I doing enough? Am I training hard enough? Is a great motivator. And it should be welcomed, at least into my life. It was something that, I stopped fighting. It was, I thought, part of the responsibility of having this short window to throw everything I can into my athletic career. And Jayna talks a lot about it being a lifestyle. I remember right around the time I was recording this podcast with Travis Zajac, who's the ultimate pro, one of the greatest hockey nerds that I've ever played with, one of the greatest leaders I've ever played with, just day in, day out. He's been through some tough seasons here the last couple of years in New Jersey, but his professionalism day in, day out is spectacular. And I was messaging him the one day because he had sent me a clip of him doing these cutbacks we would do before practice in his driveway with rollerblades on. And I said, man, it's a special thing to watch. And we're gonna get him on the podcast here in season 2. But I said, it's a special thing to watch to see someone who's played over 1,000 games currently preparing as if they're trying to play 1,000 more. And, I've been around, Patrick Marleau, whose games played is probably close to that too. I know it's in the 1600s, I think. And Travis is on pace to, really get up there himself. Those are two guys where, Travis is approaching 40, Patrick Marleau's over it. And their childlike love for the game and their boundless energy to prepare is a great reason that they are the pros that they are. And it's something that, I've really tried to embody and steal from them as role models. And Jane and I, we talk about it. We talk about the 24/7 nature of being an athlete. And it's something I always try to bring to kids. I try to explain to them and help them understand the round-the-clock nature that is the responsibility of trying to be your best. And it's something that you see even as young pros start to make some money and there's a lot of different interests that can come up, in NHL careers where all of a sudden you've got contacts at country clubs and guys want you to, travel and do things in the summer. You're invited to weddings. It's easy to, not in a summer like this, but in other summers sometimes where you're traveling and just becoming more busy with other things, it's easy to forget about what's most important and really what's closest to your heart as an athlete, which is you have one career to make the best of it. And Jane, I think another example of someone who, given her longevity and given her excellence in the sport of hockey, when you kind of pull the curtain back and ask her what was so key to your success, she was thinking about all the time. Where attention goes, energy flows. I think that's that came out in the Chris Kuchis podcast, which we'll get to. Which is a Tony Robbins classic. And you can tell Jana was always considering, what have I done to get better? What was good enough about it? What can I improve? And I think it, is when you speak to someone of her caliber, the simplicity yet amazing nature of her process came through. And I was super grateful for our time together. I think she did a fantastic job explaining, sort of the beauty and the dark side of, being as competitive as she was, with another athlete, that we lost this year. And Kobe Bryant was very famous for that, right? Where he talked about the mama mentality and how he danced with this dark desire to be the very best and how it had, some sharp edges at times, but it can be a great fuel factor in the development as a pro athlete. So Jana, thank you for your time. You'll always be a part of the first season as we were trying to build this podcast out. I want to again highlight some of the outstanding athletes and work ethics on display in women's hockey. And, as men's hockey has gained some stable footing here for the next couple of years, again, with the CBA being ratified and the return to play protocols being in place. We'll see how, these things all age as COVID is still pretty uncertain, but I hope it leverages itself well to aid the women's game as well in due time once the league gets back up and running.
I remember I came into Michigan as this highly touted recruit. I won the CJHL Player of the year before, and I was like, man, this is going to be easy. Like, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to take off and I'll score a point a game. And I got in there and, boy, was I wrong. I had 9 points in my first, 40 games. Red Berenson kind of pulled me into his office after our end of the year team meeting after, my first year. And he says, Zach, you're doing all the right things. You're working hard. You just need to keep going and keep working and, have a positive attitude. And I think that, if you're going to make the NHL, you're going to really have to figure out, how you're going to make the NHL. Like, what are you going to be good at? So how are you going to make the NHL? And that kind of hit me like, man, if I can't score goals at the college level, like, how am I going to score goals at the next level? Like, what can I do better, than anybody else? What can I work on that, will separate me from other people?
So first off, thank you to Zach Hyman. He was the first teammate, well, I guess ex-teammate, to volunteer to come on. And hockey guys, for whatever reason, we talked about in the beginning of this podcast, can be a little shy. But Hymes, I think, was an obvious choice for me to want to talk with about his development in hockey, because I knew he'd had some of this early career adversity. I knew he'd had, some of these difficult and doubtful times during his time at the University of Michigan, but he really repositioned himself well to project out and look at the NHL and think, okay, where can I add value to a team? Where can I make myself indispensable, where the coach just cannot take me out of the lineup? And I think that is an awesome lesson for a lot of young players, because they all grow up, they want to be goal scorers in the NHL, they want to be superstars, and I will never discourage a young player from having those aspirations, but there comes a time where you have to be realistic with yourself and be able to have that reflective period of your strengths and weaknesses. And for Zach, it, led to, the leverage that he was able to use coming out of college, with Florida and ending up in a better fit in Toronto. And he's been, a rock really in that lineup ever since he arrived. And I love the conscious decision he made to separate himself. We talk about this too with the Kevin Rooney podcast. You're going to find, there's a lot of players, and we have some other ones where, JVR, it's clear. He scores goals. He scored goals at every level, and he's continued to do so, into the National Hockey League. Mitchie Marner, he's a 100-point guy. There's very few players on the planet that can do what he does. But when it comes down to, sort of the meatloaf, the middle of your lineup, you've got to find ways, and I'm going through this with my own career, where you're trying to find ways to make yourself indispensable, someone that the coach absolutely cannot believe that they can win a game without. And Hyams has been able to do that. And then, something that wasn't in that highlight video, but I remember well from the Hyman podcast, is he sort of has this like anti-squeeze recipe that he shares with us, where he has these outside interests outside the sport. And when you're playing 82 games and you're getting hit from behind and you're tired and you're traveling and you're on the road and, your meetings, you're going through your daily meetings and your daily practices, the game of hockey can take a toll, particularly at the professional level. Also at the youth level, where kids are now practicing 24/7, 365, but that's, another conversation for another day. But Hyams, I think, has this cool balance to his life in a career path where imbalance and pure obsession with your sport is celebrated. And I think that can serve some people well. In the same breath, we just talked about, Kobe with the Jana Hefford podcast. That seemed to be his thing, where he was just deeply, deeply obsessed. But that approach isn't for everybody. And I think Hyams is a great example where he was able to build these different legs to his life that help him remove the squeeze out of his game when things aren't going well, where you're coming to the rink just, trying to grit your teeth and grit it out the best you can. And I think it helps him with his professional resiliency. And I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes with it, with his gaming company and the charity in years to come.
Yeah, I think for those mental things, again, that stuff in the last couple of years, I think I've started to realize just the different things that you can do to help that as far as like a routine. Because like, again, it's always like you get told these things, oh, you got to be mentally strong, or you got to do these things, or do work on strength or whatever, like do these different things on the ice. And it's like, what does that look like? Like, how do you improve that? So there's different things I've definitely been exposed to over the years. And the last couple of years, I've found just doing some different breathing techniques and stuff like that. That's really kind of helped me kind of focus in and be a little bit more present in the moment as far as stuff before games. And I found also, again, like stuff to help me sleep and things like that. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of times, again, it seems like just in over the years of exploring different things, it seems like something that, again, it's such a basic thing. You think like, how many breaths do we take in a day? But it's something that maybe you don't really get taught a ton about. So that's been really cool for me to learn a lot about over the last couple of years.
So that brings us to our second hockey guest on this podcast, James Van Riemsdyk, JVR. He's one of the more curious competitors I've ever been around. He has this question that he asks himself daily of how good can I get? He was, a player that, coming up in the league, he was a high, NHL draft pick. He was able to enter the NHL at a young age, but he still has this very boyish, dreamlike quality to his day-to-day habits and routines. He tries to take, abstract, concepts like mental toughness and how to improve recovery and make concrete habits out of them. And it just goes to show how exhaustive he is in trying to find an edge. And to be honest, most of the NHLers I'm around, most of my teammates that I've been able to play with are this way, where they are thinking of every second of how they go through the day and where they can gain just, the slightest of percentage of improvement. And it just, goes to show, like, JVR is even looking at how he breathes in a day and how it can fuel improved recovery. I think it'll be really interesting to see, what we talk about it all the time, what he gets obsessed with next. You never know, when JVR and I are texting, or I see his phone, his number come up on my phone, what in the world he's going to have for me. Maybe he's decided to start juggling on one foot or trying to sleep upside down. Like, I can't wait to see what's next for him. Super grateful for our time together, and really his friendship. He's been, I was always this curious and this hungry to find an edge. And JVR was one of these people that once I met him, it was like, kind of gave me permission. Like, okay, it's okay to be a hockey nerd like this. Like, this is just who I am. And he helped me feel more comfortable about, my routines and goals as a professional, as he was someone like me really in the room.
The best example I probably have was last year in August at the Pettit Center when I broke the world record for 100 miles in 12 hours. When I got to around like 68, 70 miles, my mind just clicked right away. Oh, this is just one more long run now. And I was no longer thinking about breaking the 100-mile world record or the 12-hour world record, or that I was going to run 100 miles plus that day. I was thinking about just doing one more long run, which I had done, 8, 9, 10 of in the weeks leading up to that. So to me, that really kind of normalized a part of the race that could have been a very big, and in the past had been a very big mental hurdle to kind of get over. So I think that side of this, that just really highlights the mental side of the sport. It feels like it's intense and it's really hard on your body at the end, but in reality, the intensity is still very low, sometimes even lower because you're slowing down a bit. But I think if you can really harness that mental strength and learn what's going to work for you to keep you motivated, that's what's going to kind of really get you your best days.
After JVR, we had a podcast with the first person I actually had never had a personal relationship with. I had first heard of Zach Bitter when I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I thought, what an animal this guy is, being the 100-mile world record holder. And I'm constantly, just like the last two podcasts, looking for an edge, looking for improved balance in my life somehow, some way. And a great source of inspiration for me is sometimes looking across other disciplines, other sports. And with Zach, one of the things that I really wanted to implement and integrate into my life was he does this, he very eloquently put in the video there, where he's able to take long journeys or take brutally demanding physical feats and chop them up into like digestible, smaller goals. And it's something that I even think of, in training camp where, 2 or 3 days will go by, maybe you're tired, you're starting to get worn down after the, increase in intensity. And I'll think, just get through the first game. Like just, you can feel tired, but not today. That day will come, but just wait to feel tired until the first off day. And you're able to merge body and mind where it doesn't really matter who's calling the shots anymore, because you're able to will yourself into feeling the way that you need to feel to perform the way that you want to. And, Zach talks about that, where how he feeds his own personal fire in moments of doubt during race time. And he's a beast. We've stayed in contact ever since, which is a super cool, benefit of having a podcast like this and having conversations with individuals as unique and highly motivated as him. So Zach, thanks again for coming on. What a beast. I still can't believe this was, we had filmed the podcast right before his charity run for Fight for the Forgotten. And he did end up breaking the 12-hour treadmill world record shortly after this podcast. So I was grateful he was able to carve out an hour of his time to talk together. in the middle of, what must have been a pretty demanding training cycle.
I mean, I would just give the advice of don't give up on your dream. Like work hard as much as you can. Make sure when no one's watching, you're still doing the work. I mean, it's not all about fame and celebrity. Yes, I guess you could say it's about what you do behind the curtains. It's what you do when no one's really looking, how you do it. I think growing up as a kid for me, it was a lot of naysayers or doubters. I mean, I remember I got drafted to London. I think I was 5'6", 125 pounds or something like that. And you're looking at today's OHL drafts, and the average height's got to be around 5'11", and weight's got to be around 190. So it was kind of like that, I guess, in my draft too. But I mean, I think the thing is just, if you work like a dog, and the coaches are going to like that. If you don't grow into your size, you know how to, I'd say, play in those small areas, get the puck out of those small areas, and make something out of it. I think that's kind of where I really grown. As I was a really small player, so I had to learn how to dodge players and learn how to keep my feet moving, to get away from corners or walls, to keep the puck and keep my feet going and create plays. And I've kind of grown up, obviously, and kind of starting now to look like I'm building out a little bit more. We'll see. But I think that's just the thing of what's been great for me, is that now I'm a little taller. I can now, do those battles and still keep my feet moving and get off the wall. But I would just say, don't listen to any doubters. It's always going to be people doubting you regardless of who you are in life. And, I think the best thing is just when you get to prove those doubters wrong, and, one day you're going to get to look the same people in the face, and, you don't even have to say anything. They just know that they screwed up, and that, you can just sit there and just chest out Puffy and,
turn TSN on. Turn TSN on tonight and check the top 10 out. First off, let me say on Mitchie Marner, one of the players' favorite players in the league. I think that across the board, he is one of the more fun and creative and loving athletes in our game. And I mean both that as a teammate. He's a very loving person and cares deeply for his teammates, but he also has this deep love for the sport that is so contagious when you're around him. And he talks about that, in the clip there, where he still dreams every day. He still, is that, 14 or 15-year-old hockey player where he believes his growth and his best hockey is still ahead of him. And he does have that style of work ethic where he's not totally in your face with it. He does not always show his cards, openly, with how hard he works to get better as a superstar in this game. But I think that he has a healthy relationship, as you can see, that he will work through the doubt. He does not internalize other people's opinion of him. He does not wear their concerns personally. He has this inner knowing that when the puck drops, he may look meek, but he's got that puffy chest where he's in his arena. He's in his sweet spot. And to share a jersey with Mitch was, a gift. Who knows if we'll get that opportunity again. But will always be a close friend for me, and someone that I'll watch with admiration as he's able to do what he's able to do in the coming years. He's still young as an NHLer, believe it or not, for how much success he's had. But a special part of a Toronto Maple Leafs team that, is positioned to be strong for time to come. And I think their leadership group with someone like Mitch is in good shape. He truly, I can't say it enough, an outstanding person and an outstanding teammate, someone that, from afar, I enjoy watching and studying just because there's so much to learn for a player as undersized and as creative as he is. And finally, Mitch blindly said yes to coming on this podcast. I know sometimes when you're playing in a media market as ravenous as Toronto, you can get a little concerned over doing any sort of interview of this length that, you're to say something that would be mistaken or things like that. But just goes to show how supportive of a friend he is, that he was more than excited to hang out. And I'm glad he gave up the microphone too, because he wanted to keep it for his gaming. And I told him, man, I just, I'll buy you a different one. I got to keep the train going for recording. But Mitchie's super grateful for our time always. And hopefully, as things clear up here with quarantine, things like that, we get a chance to hang out up in Toronto if I can take a training trip or something up there. But thanks again, man, for your time. You're the man.
So I think, success is beautiful. We need to see how far we can go. I think we dishonor ourselves and we dishonor our maker by not seeing how much of our gifts we can capitalize. Having said that, it's a game. At the end, it doesn't come down to how many trophies we have. I think it comes down to what kind of human beings we were and how many people we helped. And if you can connect with your mortality, as depressing as it sounds, it's inspiring, because then you go, am I going to live my life in such a way designed to have my name on a hospital wing or for an epitaph? Or I'm going to, because now people are talking about legacy a lot. I wrote a book 22 years ago called Who Will Cry When You Die about legacy. I don't care about legacy now. We'll be dead. Who cares about our legacy? We'll be food for worms. I think it's asking ourselves right now in this quiet time, how, at the end, how will I wished I will have lived? That's the sport of the Titans, I think.
So following up the Mitchie Marner podcast would have been tough for any guest. So I called on, one of the heavyweights that I look up to in the self-help world, one of the titans of his industry, in Robin Sharma. And what I really took from him was he had this beautiful duality to success. He defined it both as what he could produce as a businessman, what he could produce, safety-wise, personally and financially for himself and his family. But it was through the lens of how can he also take great rest along the process? How can he make time and prioritize family time and personal enjoyment? He talked about these dual cycles of success at length in our podcast that I was really struggling with at the time, early in quarantine with COVID. I was getting a little obsessive with training and things like that. And Robin was this breath of fresh air, where he helped clarify and help me refocus the game that life is. I identify with this, where I both feel a deep need to meet my potential, to pursue my potential. I want to leave nothing on the table. I would hate to die and someday and know that I could have done more or impacted people's lives more positively. But at the same time, you cannot burn too hot. To burn out is to fail. And, Robin just has this reverse engineering way where he is able to consider his mortality and consider the fact, he says the quote there, we'll all be food for worms, which can be morbid, but it also helps intensify the importance of now. For me anyway, it helps me stay present. It helps me realize that this moment isn't forever, and our life should not be taken lightly. We all can make a difference in our own life. We all can make a difference in someone else's life. And I think that responsibility is invigorating, not something to be fearful of or to become smaller in the face of. And Robin is a role model for me, someone that has a deep integration of his beliefs. He embodies alignment. I know that's a sexy word right now in the self-help world, but he has this deep understanding, this integration, this implementation of how he wants to move through the world. And I learned so much in our conversation with him, just to witness the magic behind someone who's able to have these and experience these cycles of deep focus and also playful rest. And I think that if you have not caught the Robin Sharma podcast, go back. He is a gift to listen to. If you don't like my voice, no problem. Which I'd be shocked because we've made it this far together on the podcast. But go check out any of his books, any of his work. I have so much appreciation for Robin. I also know, someone of his size as an author and as a businessman, to carve out a good chunk of his time to sit down together was a huge honor. And, I consider him really an ally in our mission to help people live better lives together. And I know I was able to, better do so. I got a ton of texts from close friends. My brothers both texted me after the Robin Sharma podcast, some of their favorite highlights, things that they wanted to, bring into their own life. I had a friend of mine, Tommy Abrams, who just graduated business school at the University of Illinois. He went on his way to text me about how deeply he resonated with this podcast and some of the areas of his life that Robin directly addressed and helped him with. And I think that's super special and kind of a byproduct I want to speak about on, this particular episode, where my relationship with myself has grown in this podcasting process, where I've been able to have these scheduled periods of reflection, these conversations with people that I look up to and have a lot of respect for, but also the relationships of all of my friends and family has continued to develop, because my relationship with them is a one-way, sort of hallway, right? Where it's an A and B conversation that exists between us, and they don't necessarily always have insight to how I go through the world and how I think about, different topics that maybe aren't a part of our relationship. And now it's allowed for, more nuance in other relationships in my life. And it's been a really cool development of hosting this podcast and a really fun and interesting byproduct.
I've been in NHL hockey games where you feel like, you touch the puck first game and you feel like you're like, okay, I'm going to play good today. You get the puck in the first shift and you don't get it out on the wall. In the next 3 shifts, you don't even want the puck almost. And it's just it's such a defeating feeling. And you're on the bench and you're telling yourself not to think like that and not to feel that. And it's so hard to control that. And so, I think a lot of it just comes with maturity. I think, that's why older guys become more consistent players, because, they're less emotionally attached to the highs and lows of the game. And I think that just in time, I've kind of developed that of just that sense of maturity and consistency in my game that, I know that I'm not as bad as my mistakes. And, it's an easy thing to say, and it's a harder thing to execute. But I think that I've found that this year, I've had bad shifts and I was able to bounce back, and I was able to take criticism on the bench and know that, I don't suck, and know that, you always laugh around guys in the bench. You always come back. It's like, I suck. How many times you hear that? It's like, we all know that the guy doesn't suck. Right. Yeah. And we also been there. We know that feeling. It's like, I suck right now. Like I can't even and so, just that, it's just that maturity of knowing that you're not as bad as your mistakes, and, you're not as good as your toe drag. So you just got to find that healthy median of what makes you a good player and, what your limits are out there.
So one of my favorite things that came out of the Connor Brown podcast was how you're never as good as your highlight reel, but you're never as bad as your mistakes as a hockey player. Hockey is such a team sport. It can look like, a mistake, but, people up in the stands, they may not understand, that puck was in your feet. It was a poor pass on its way in, so you didn't have the opportunity to get your head up and see your options. And eventually, you make a force play and turn a puck over. This was a lesson my first NHL coach, Adam Oates, always used to say. He would say, after a good or bad game, go ahead and watch your shifts. Like, were you really that good? Were you all of a sudden that dynamic? Or even, to flip the coin, look at your mistakes. Look at, the difficulty, the position you were on the ice. Maybe you had a lack of support. Maybe it was at the end of a shift. And it wasn't to remove yourself from being responsible for your play. You always have to answer, to your result. But you don't have to always necessarily obsess over it. And I think Brownie, highlights that. And he's been a player that's been able to do it, So you always want to talk with people who are able to achieve what you're after. And Brownie is a player that, came into the league, scored early, exuded great poise. He was competitive night in, night out. He was a player I'd identify as a very consistent NHLer. He's got great energy. Each and every game, he always finds a way, whether it's offensively or on the defensive side, sort of being an agitator and a puck hound. He's someone that adds value to the lineup every night. And even, the process that he's had to engage with and how to be more consistent, I think was great insight. And that bounce back ability, I think, is so important in life for sure, but definitely in any pro sport. If you want to play pro hockey, there's so many hockey games. There's 82 games in a year. You're going to play tired. You're going to play sick. You're going to play hurt. You're going to play on back-to-backs. You're not going to sleep well. You're going to be in the top of the lineup. You're going to be in the bottom of the lineup. But can you facilitate, some grace in your self-talk that can create the feeling of poise that you're after? And Brownie, I think, has some great nuggets in that podcast where he shares how he's done it. And it shows. It shows in his result and his growth. This past season, for example, as an Ottawa Senator, after he moved on from, what he would say, were a couple, mentally demanding years, towards the end there in Toronto. So Brownie, you still suck at Catan. I wish you could apply some of these principles there, but, man, you can't be good at everything. And I hope, as quarantine here, settles up, I'm able to get up north and bug you for a round of golf, and hopefully take some of your money or something like that. But Brownie, you're the man. Thanks for coming on. Always love talking life. Always love talking hockey with you, bro.
Yeah. And I think when fear is discouraged, like if that's like the worst, if people are trying to avoid failure at all costs, that's when you start to lose on creativity and, people having the willingness and the confidence to try new things. Like if you try something and it doesn't work out and you're shamed for it, or you beat yourself up over it because the culture is such that, failure is a bad thing, then you're much less likely to try something new or try something innovative the next time that opportunity arises. So I think that when we think about failure, I would love to see it celebrated. Like, good for you. You tried something new. You thought of something outside of the box that has not, been adopted common practice. And if this is, for the young players, I think this would be so helpful for them to be like, how can I get around, a defensive player or whatever in a unique and innovative way? And if you fail, like, so what? Good for you for trying. But I think that that's what I would love to see, because I think what you'll see there is more creation. You'll see a lot more creativity, and you'll see a lot more, I would say creativity and innovation. That's what I think comes from failure.
Up next was our podcast with Dr. Stephanie Estima. And I have to admit, this was one of the podcasts I was personally most nervous for. For one, I love her podcast Better. I listen to it often. And she is just brilliant. She's very well thought out. She has great precision and care with her word choice, and she's just a very thoughtful person. And so in this podcast, we talk about the relationship that most of society has with fear, and sort of from a clinical, neurological background, what the flaws are, particularly in youth sport. Dr. Steph is from Toronto, a hockey mad town. I'm from Chicago, and again, that North American coaching model is oftentimes based on penalizing mistakes. And so what I think of is I've played internationally against other countries, for example, and with Team USA, we always played a very direct, a very north or in a game, a limit turnovers style of game, versus we would play Team Sweden, for example, and they would have this spectacular display of puck possession. They would go, they would pass defenseman to defenseman. The defenseman would climb, pass it back to the other D-man. He would skate, and there was just this emphasis you could tell culturally on making plays and valuing patience with the puck, poise with the puck, creativity with the puck. And I think that we see some of the Swedish dominance at the skill positions in the National Hockey League. And I think a lot of it, I haven't spent any time over there training, but I would love to, before my career's over, to go over and stay with, I've had some Swedish teammates and stay with either them or join their training sessions, because I want to gain some better insight, why they're creating the high-end talent that, Sweden has for such a long time. And so it's such a shift. It's such an important shift of how can we facilitate flow state? And fear is a great killer of flow state. Nothing kills flow state like fear, and nothing produces elite performance like flow state. So now that brings us full circle to how are we getting in our own way? And, Dr. Steph, we'll have to have her on the podcast again, because I don't think we were able to, even capture just how brilliant of a speaker and thought leader that she is in the hour we had. But I look forward to speaking with her further. She's someone that I look up to. And if you want more of her, you can check out her podcast, Better, or she has been producing, a lot of content on Instagram as well. She's someone that, when I need to shift or I need to reposition something in my life or reframe something, I'll either call on her directly and text her and ask her thoughts about, my circumstance or situation. Or I'll, more indirectly check out her podcast. So, Dr. Steph, thank you. Every hour, every minute that we have to speak is always an investment. It's not time spent, as you said in our podcast together. Just wanted to say thank you. I'm still trying to download some of the genius that came out in that podcast. So, so much to learn from you.
And it's the and mentality. There's the real pandemic in this world, the real virus in this world is the but people. I want to do this, but this. I want to do this, but this. I want to be a great husband, but I'm a pro hockey player, so I'm always on the road. I want to be a great businesswoman, but I'm only 26. It's like when you're stuck in but, when you're addicted to but, game over. If you just have the courage to change that to an and from time to time, you'll get more used to it and it'll become easy for you to see that you can have it all. And that is really, truly my belief. You can have it all. You can have all of it. You can have the business and the great relationship and the great body and be great at finances. You can grow up with really troubling circumstances and be super successful and contribute to this world and give back. And you can do it all. And that's a belief that I believe I learned at a really young age. And again, I don't know if that was my parents or just an internal knowing, but I do know that I had the courage to trust and listen to what I had in me, what I was being. It was almost like I've been channeling these things. And if you listen to them, you know what your body wants, but you have to be willing to receive that message. So a little one-liner that I say to myself all the time that might be helpful for listeners is, you are creating the story you will one day tell. Carissa, you're creating the story you will one day tell. Pandemic hits in 10 years when you're on a stage somewhere and you're inspiring a group of 20-somethings that have hit the workforce, and then something happens like this again. What are you going to tell them to lead them? Because you can only take people as far as you've been. So I'm always acting in alignment with what I know I want to serve the world with.
So Carissa was the second badass female thought leader in a row. And I knew going into this one, this would be fire, because Carissa has this very contagious energy. She speaks with such a sense of conviction. She is an identifier of excuse making professionally. This is what she does as a national speaker for Tony Robbins. And, one of the things I think that can be intimidating about Carissa is this thought that you can have it all. And I think it's beautiful because I see it in relationships that I have, with family members, that we as a society are obsessed with busy. We're obsessed with feeling and explaining to others the stresses we're going through day in, day out. And Carissa, through her frameworks and working with Tony and sort of downloading a lot of his content and being around some of the most successful people in the world, she has a really strong relationship with organization, with personal conviction, with speaking to herself in a way that will allow her to overcome her shortcomings over the course of time. And this was one of the podcasts that I got a ton of feedback from in terms of close friends, where something clicked. Because I have, a lot of close friends where society, they're in their 20s and they're told that they're not supposed to have all the answers, or that it's okay to be perennially tired, or, just be trying to get through the week to, drink and have fun on the weekends. And Carissa will act as a mirror, for you to see if this is what you really want for yourself, because she's a dream doer. And I think that we as society can use more of these examples of people who live with this fire in their belly and will not spend any time wasting time that they could be using to pursue their dream. Carissa, instead of justifying the excuses that may prevent her from achieving what she has set out to achieve in her life, she spends all that time focusing on solution-based thinking. And much like, very similar to Robin Sharma, they both have this end result oriented way of thinking that helps them get through whatever present discomfort they're experiencing in their life. Carissa says it where she says, "You are creating the story you will one day tell." And that's something I'll use, if I'm in the middle of a bad game. And I think I had reposted on my Instagram earlier this week where I said, adversity is an opportunity to earn respect. And when you're able to think of the end goal that you so desire in mind, you will give yourself permission to go through great present day pain, mentally or physically, whatever you're suffering through at that time. And it's something that has become a superpower of mine. And it's something that I've studied in other people where they're able to exude this resiliency. And Carissa, I'm fired up even after, listening to her speak right there in that clip. Like, her energy is it's very in your face, and she's not apologetic about engaging in the process to become, the woman and business leader and thought leader that she so desires. And Carissa, I think we'll have to have her on again as she continues to grow in her own personal career. But, I know where she lives, given we were neighbors growing up, so I'll be able to get a hold of her. But truly an exceptional individual. And if you're low on energy today and could use a little bit of a boost, I think Carissa's podcast Together might be a great place to start, as she is not always so forgiving of whatever excuses you want to make.
But I had a teammate, a girl who was trying out for the national team. When I was first trying out for the senior team, Marilyn Rochon was trying out for the team with me, and she was a master's student at McGill in sports psychology. And she told me that her thesis was all about lying. So the rowers, she was using rowers, and so there's the tests. 10 athletes come in, and she says, do your best. And they're honest with them. And those athletes get very close to their personal best. And another 10 athletes come in and they lie to them. Like, they take away all of the feedback. And when they think they're going fast, she would say, "No, you're going slow," like during the test. And they would always lie to them, like, give them a performance that was a little slower than they were going. And that whole group got personal best, like blew it out of the ballpark. And then the third group comes in and they lied to them the other way. So when they thought they were going, they thought they were going good. They were going, "Oh, you're going great. This is amazing. Like, you're like on pace for a world record," kind of thing. That whole group slowed down, right? Wow. Where the goal was to get as great a test as possible, right? It wasn't to get a certain score. It was to do as well as possible. And what she was able to tell me at that time was that our brain will limit us. So that last group didn't think they were capable of being great. And so they dumbed it down a little bit. So, cause they thought they were good. They were going for who they thought they was good. And the other test, the middle group that I talked about, they thought they were good. They didn't think they were bad. And so when they were being told they were bad, they're like, "Oh my God, I'm at least good. And so they pulled it up. And what they did was they actually pushed themselves up to great. And so for me, that's one of those mind games where our mind will always try to limit what our body can do. So we should, whenever possible, get out of the way.
Our next guest, Marty McBean, was the first Olympic rower that I'd ever spoken with. And I kind of knew rowing was brutal in terms of the physical toll. I didn't know how graceful it was in speaking with Marty about some of the training practices and just the relationship with your teammates. Such a beautifully blended sport between grace and grit. So what I took from Marty's quote there in my own personal life was I really had to think of my relationship with tough coaching. And have I in the past welcomed being pushed in a way that I would be proud of? And when Marty gives us the example of the three groups of the different rowers and whether they're getting positive, sort of neutral or truthful feedback, or they're being told that they're not good enough, that it was in fact the group that was being pushed, being told that they were not good enough, was the group that scored the highest. It made me think, do I want to be, sort of fat and happy along this process? Do I just want to be pat on the back for everything I'm doing as a professional? Or do I want to be the best I can be? Am I mentally open to being pushed, being challenged to be a greater player, to train harder, to be more in control, and less accepting of excuses? And that's something that I've really tried to download, and reconsider, from our conversation with Marty, because I'm not always in control of how I'm being coached. The coach's job, particularly in pro hockey, it's not his or her job to make sure I'm cool with, or I have given them permission to coach me the way that they see fit. It's my job as the player to best respond to whatever coaching is being provided. I am only in control of myself. I'm not in control of them. And so with Marnie, I kind of made the decision, I don't want to need someone to tell me how good I'm doing. I want to know that, personally I have that conviction, and that actually, this challenge that there's, Connor, there's better player here available. Connor, you can be better. Connor, you're not pushing hard enough. That there's actually great beauty in that. And, psychologically, could be unlocking, the best hockey that I've yet to play, in my career. And it was a very challenging thought exercise that Marnie presented when she was, quoting that study.
It was my junior year of college. We had a home and home against BU, probably around December, maybe a little before. But anyways, the first night we had them at home, and they had a good team that year. We ended up playing in the national championship. So I'll just jump to I'll set the stage.
Not a big deal.
Yeah. So we play them a home and home. We play them the first night at home. They got Jack Eichel on their team, Danny O'Regan, Evan Rodriguez. Real good team. We had a real deep team as well too. But they come out the first night. They pump us at home 5-1, 4-1. Eichel had probably 3-4 points. So, we knew we were a little behind them at that point. So we get to the next night. We're in BU. Coach calls my line in and says, "Hey, listen, you guys are the fastest guys that can, keep up with these guys, and your job tonight is shut this kid down." I didn't even think about anything on the offensive side of the puck. I'm like, let's just see how this goes. Let's let the other guys take care of the offense. And that night I hit him probably 10 times. He hated me. I was killing him, and I started to draw attention to myself. Scouts started calling our coach, and we ended up playing them again in the national championship, and I kind of did the same thing, and we ended up winning it. So a couple years down the road, I heard Ray Shero when he called me and signed me. He told me the story that at the draft, they interviewed Jack, and he asked him who the hardest player to play against was, and he said Kevin Rooney. So that's why they signed me, and it was pretty cool. It was one player I played really hard against, and it ended up helping me down the road.
So that Jack Eichel story with Kevin Rooney, reminds me of my dad when I was growing up. He told me every single second that you are ever wearing hockey skates, every time you step onto the ice, you are being evaluated. And you never know when doing things the right way will pay off. And for Runes, we're not talking about, some, small game. Like, these were big moments in his college career. But this whole embodiment that Runes has of being an ultimate teammate, right? Like, what I hear in that story is he identified how he could create value for his team. It's what he's brought into his pro career. How can I, bring value to this team? There was great buy-in there. Runes is a low ego guy, a low ego hockey player in a way that serves him. It allows him to get out of his own way and hear the message his coach is asking of him. And when he says, I didn't even worry about offense, it put a ring on Runes' finger. He shut down, probably the best player in college hockey that year, and clearly an NHL superstar in Jack Eichel, and is a national champion. What if Runes was the guy that didn't want the assignment? Coach, I want to be the guy that scores the winning goal. Would his team have won the national title or not? I don't know. But I think that, there's great lessons in being an ultimate teammate and being a team forward thinker. Isn't always necessarily celebrated in pro sport. Sometimes it can be hard to put personal goals aside for the team. But, Runes is a success story and a testament to the importance of knowing when to do that. And it's I think what really gave birth to his pro career. And obviously, winning a national championship with Providence College has to be, if not the greatest, hockey achievement he's had. Definitely one of his greatest memories. But he's an awesome teammate, someone that, I loved going to war with every day. He's, UFA this summer. So Runes, thanks for, hanging out together. I hope we get a chance again to play together next year down the road. You're an awesome guy. And I'm forgetting too to say, Runes talks about how many times he hit Eichel in that game. He also talks about in our podcast when he was coming back against the Rangers off the finger injury. Runes got in a fight that game. There's something about, there's moments in your career where you've got to rise up above what you are. And Runes is not the most physically imposing guy, but he's got a will and he's got a determination to win and to, frankly, make his teammates and his coaches proud. That makes him, such a treasured teammate. And, I learned a lot from Runes and we've talked about some of these subjects and some of these accomplishments of his, in the past over dinner and things like that, but never to this depth. And, that's another reason why I'm so grateful I got out of my own way and finally answered the call to, start this podcast and have some of these conversations that I thought I know I could benefit from, but also that, you, our listener, could, gain a lot of insight, for your own life from some of these special people that have, been so generous with volunteering their time together. Well, and thank you everyone for listening to season 1. Please continue to like, subscribe, share with family members, share with friends, share with teammates that you think will, gain something from this podcast. I also want to announce for season 2, we will be changing our name to the Curious Competitor Podcast. I think that is where this podcast has lived already, and it's a lot of what we talk about. But it's a fuel source that I want to tap into more in my own personal life, and I think it's something I want to draw more wisdom from, our guests as we move forward. And with season 2, I have some really outstanding guests that I'm super excited to share with you. But if you have any thoughts on guests that you'd like to see as our listener, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I, check my DMs pretty often. You can, hashtag CCPod on Twitter. See, it still works out for CCPod. That's why we kept it. But, thank you again for listening. I have gained so much from this journey. If I can, I have really uncovered the power of spending more time with people that I respect and would like to learn from, and personally love and cherish my relationship with them. It's been a great source of inspiration for me, and I hope it has been for you too. And I can't wait to see what we were able to uncover with season 2. I'm getting a little gushy here, but we're not taking any time off. It'll come out next week, so it's not some big crazy grand finale, and I look forward to doing it together each and every week. But let's do this. Let's keep seeing where we can go, and thank you for joining me on my journey to be a more curious competitor.